All right, everyone, keynote is down. Now we are going to get to our first panel, Quantum Leap in Geospatial Intelligence, Navigating the Future with Quantum Computing. This panel will begin the day's exploration of domain disruptors by envisioning the future possibilities of quantum-enhanced geospatial technologies, exploring how quantum computing may unlock new frontiers in understanding and managing spatial data. Again, we do encourage you to please ask questions as well, so please submit through the app, through texting, through the website, all of the possibilities. All right, so the panelists are Dr. Joe Brose, Vice President of Quantum Growth and Market Development, IBM, Jared Burns, R&D, IT, Infrastructure, and HPC Lead, Research and Development, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, Gina Cinta, Deputy Chief Technology Officers, Thales Trusted Cyber Technologies. And the panel will be moderated by Sean Batir, who serves as the first Chief Technology Officer of the MAVEN program at National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. Mr. Batir brings a decade of experience in technology innovation from Silicon Valley and academia into the defense intelligence enterprise, including real-world applications of large language models, computer vision, multi-int fusion to enhance intelligence operations workflows to the warfighters. Mr. Batir holds a bachelor's degree in brain and cognitive sciences from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a master's degree in bioengineering focusing in neural engineering from the Imperial College of London, a master's of business administration of the Quantum School of Science and Technologies, and certificates in quantum computing and algorithm design from MIT, and biomedical entrepreneurship from Oxford University's said business school. So clearly, no better person for the job. Please help me welcome Sean and the panel.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Sean Batir, and you've met our amazing panel. And so we wanted to kick off the day with sort of level setting everyone's understanding of what spatial and quantum computing really means and what it is. And so if we dive a little bit into quantum computing, one of the things that I first like to sort of just level set on are, if you're a complete novice or neophyte to this field, the great way to think about it is like this. We essentially have bits which formulate classical computing. That means that you essentially encode information in the world in zeros and ones. However, one of the benefits of quantum computing is that no longer are you stuck in this binary paradigm. Instead, we have the capacity for capabilities such as superposition. That means that the quantum state can encode information in 0, 1, or in a variety of a waveform, all between. But of course, that is why we've got this excellent panel that collectively has worked on this for, maybe almost a century if you add up all of our years on this field. So without further ado, I'll pose my first question, which is, what is the state of quantum computing? And with that, we've also got some slides prepared for you to take a quick look, and I'll pass that over to you, Joe Brose.
Thank you, Sean. Good morning. Let me just preface my remarks here by saying that that quantum computing is in a really high state of development right now. And if the slides can come up, we'll take a real quick look at something that will give you an idea of the time frame. So on this graphic, what we have is on the horizontal axis, something about the size of circuits required, a quantum circuit, in order to achieve certain problem solutions. On the vertical axis is the circuit width, the number of qubits that might be required. Now you'll see these amoeba-like colors on the upper right-hand side, and what that describes are the theoretical published requirements in order to solve some key problems in chemistry, cryptography, optimization, materials science. Now, if you look at this graphic, we're currently in 2024 right at an era which has crossed what we call the pre-utility regime, and we have now crossed over into a threshold where we are headed along that blue vector up toward those important applications and algorithms. Another phenomenon indicated here is as we move along that blue vector, by investing in algorithm development, we're seeing a phenomenon indicated by the green vector where those algorithms become more efficient. And as we go through our panel today, I think a number of us will talk about the investment in algorithm and development and its importance, and how, when we do that, we're kind of moving the overall timeline to the left. Let's talk about the timeline for a second. Everyone wants to know when. Well, this is our timeline at IBM Quantum. Every company has a timeline or a roadmap that's in the quantum computing area. And where we see is a progression of increasingly large machines. 26, 29 is what we call our Starling class machine. That'll have 10,000 qubits in it. And then by 2033, we will have a 100,000 qubit machine. Yeah. The next slide, and I'll conclude my remarks in terms of where we are in quantum computing. For the longest time, the industry had targeted that red circle. That's the point at which classical methods have a certain resource requirement to solve a problem of complexity. And as the complexity increases, you move along that gray curve called classical methods. And it grows exponentially with the size of the problem and the complexity of the problem. So quantum computers, fault-tolerant machines, grow linearly as the blue curve. And the industry was really headed toward that red circle, where to hit that point, to do something quantumly was less costly from a resource standpoint than to do it classically. What we have done is, and many in the industry are moving and cutting that corner with what we call error mitigation. This allows us to have earlier resources dedicated to these problems, and we are at that purple circle in the lower left, crossing the resource boundary earlier, and that's where we are today, moving up that green curve toward fault tolerance. We expect to be in that fault-tolerant regime between 2029 and 2033, and as you saw on the previous graphic, that's where we become resource relevant to some very outstanding problems. I think this is a general statement for the industry, and right now we're in an era of utility, and we're moving toward the era of quantum advantage. Let me turn it back over.
Well, I think that's great, and thank you so much for sharing that, Joe. Now, I do want to sort of drive the audience to this final concept, which is, and Joe and Gina and Jared and I backstage were sort of talking about what does it look like for us to partner. So, Joe, I think if you wanted to discuss a little bit about this.
Yeah, one of the things about partnering and developing these algorithms that will be increasingly efficient and more capable is really expressed by these two arrows. Here we are today in 2024 in an era of quantum utility, and by creating algorithms, applications, and software as we move to the right, those are the partnerships that will allow us to utilize these machines, make the algorithms more efficient, and leverage the advanced quantum systems that are now coming on the market. In the first part of that motion, we'll be in the quantum utility area with NISQ, or noisy intermediate scale quantum computers. And as we move to the right, will move into the era of fault-tolerant, error-corrected quantum computers that are more universal. But there are many applications now that are emerging in the utility era, and that is expressed by these two vectors as we go to the right. Those are the investments that the United States government, public-private partnerships need to make.
Thank you so much. And for those of you in the audience, as we continue this conversation, I do urge you to think about how you, your companies, or your use cases could actually partner more closely with us, not only at NGA, but more broadly with the US government. And so speaking of US government, we've got some great representatives. One of my colleagues here, Jared, actually works with me. And so we understand that quantum machine learning has promise for enhancing geospatial analytics. Jared, over to you. But what are some high-impact use cases that you envision for quantum ML, such as image classification, change detection, and even predictive spatial modeling?
So I think this field is so new, and like Joe was talking about, we're still a little bit away from where we're really going to start being able to utilize this, and I think really being able to understand the benefits that we're going to get from this. I think some really early things that we are really going to benefit is especially like in spectral sciences. Quantum computing is supposed to be able to simulate molecular level systems better than any kind of classical computing environment ever could. So I think we're going to see some really interesting developments there. Even with large language models and the chat GPTs of now, even in the past couple of years have really exploded. And I still think we haven't even seen what the true benefits to that are going to be until the next few years. And I think quantum is going to be a very similar thing. And I think what it's really going to be able to do for imagery and GEOINT in general, I think is going to be really exciting to see over the next decade or so.
That's interesting. And maybe we can bring this a little bit more closer to home for you. Given your background in operations, do you have any suggestions, Jared, on how we can maybe bring sort of this type of quantum technology into operations? And what are the blockers that you've sort of faced with workforce training?
Yeah, I think workforce training is going to be a huge deal because like Joe said, quantum algorithm development is still in its very early phases. And I think we really need to, as the government, really need to be investing into getting our workforce trained to be able to use quantum in the first place. I think we would kind of do a disservice to ourselves to try and compete with corporations like Thales and IBM and bigger agencies that are really developing these kind of systems. I don't think we really need to be involving ourselves into the procurement or technical development of those things. But I think really getting a well-trained workforce that knows how to use these things is really what we need to be focusing on. But getting it into operations, I think, is always going to be a struggle. For any new technology, the government always has a hard time adopting new things, especially security-wise. I'm sure Gina's going to talk a lot about the security challenges we're going to see with quantum. And I think getting our security professionals really trained on what that means for us, how we can protect our systems against quantum encryption capabilities, I think is going to be a really big challenge. But I think it's going to be an entirely exciting new field that in the GEOINT community that we're going to be able to tackle. And I think we're going to see a lot of cool technologies and implementations and operations based off of that.
I think it's going to be able to help solve hard problems faster.
Yeah.
And that's what's really going to be exciting about the technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
That was a perfect organic transition, actually. So I was going to share with the audience.
Planned it.
Yeah, no, this is good. I was going to share with the audience something that Gina and Joe and Jared and I were talking about just backstage about 15 minutes ago, but I love this. So it's this framework, essentially, that one can think of quantum computing sort of like a yin and a yang, right? Where the yin is meant to refer to the quantum compute solution, the substrate on which you can actually do the operations. And then that yang refers to sort of that security element, that post-quantum encryption element. And this was actually a paradigm that Gina shared with me, courtesy of some of the work coming out of Charles Robinson, who works with Quantum Safe and is actually a good colleague of Joe Brose over here on the far end. And so given the sort of flavor of encryption and security, I think my next question goes over to you, Gina. I guess, what are your perspectives in terms of how we can be prepared for sort of a post-quantum encryption future, as well as how do you suggest we might manage some of these security risks?
Right. So the industry has been preparing for I would say at least the last 5 years, very actively in working with NIST and NSA with the algorithm search, right? So across the globe, there's been numerous algorithms that have been proposed to NIST for being able to handle the post-crypto migration. NIST has now narrowed those down to 4 algorithms that will be finalized, they say summer of this year. They won't commit to a date or a month, but they're very close. And we, as industry, have been developing our solutions to support those algorithms that are pre-standard right now. So we can't even roll our solutions out generally available because they're not standardized yet. And NIST, once they come across the standardization process and they're done, they have to get approval by the Department of Commerce, the Secretary of the Department of Commerce, before they are made published. Then we as an industry have to make tweaks to those algorithms that we've already been developing in our solutions so that we can then go through the NIST FIPS certification process to make them available to the world, right? And so we've been working on this for years, and it's a continuing process.
So with that in mind, I actually realize, I'm glad that you mentioned the Department of Commerce. More specifically, I'm tracking that in the Department of Commerce, they've set up something known as the Quantum Economic Development Consortium, or the QEDC. And it's my understanding that actually I think you and Joe participate in this. I guess, do you guys have a little bit of feedback that you could share with the audience here? Some of them might be newcomers, or suggestions on what it looks like for organizations to collaborate in this sort of enterprise.
Yeah, on the QEDC?
Yes.
Yeah, so the Quantum Economic Development Consortium is a group that was started in 2016, and it's a consortium of US and now international companies that are involved in the quantum industry. It was started by the Department of Commerce, and then has become an industry trade association. So it is all of the manufacturers, suppliers, and users of quantum technology in the areas of quantum computing, quantum sensing, and quantum communications. So with those 280 members, they have various technical advisory committees and explore things like use cases, export control, a whole host of issues relating to the supply chain, a number of different elements in the QEDC. It is a very active trade association in quantum. And from there, we're also able to gather a lot of information for the industry, influence policies. The QEDC has been written into a number of pieces of legislation, like the National Quantum Initiative Act that was passed in 2018. It is under reauthorization currently, and it under 5-year reauthorization. So there are a number of areas there to enhance the utilization of quantum computing, quantum sensing, and quantum communications. So the QEDC, you can Google it. It's quite an active group.
This is great. We're actually getting a lot of questions from you guys, so it seems like we've got a pretty technical audience. I have one last question, and then we'll start shifting over to some of the things that are coming in. So thank you for being so engaged at 10 a.m. in the morning. Yes, so we've been discussing the value of how we can actually operate as an ecosystem, right? Like as Joe just mentioned, you've got the private sector working in close tandem with the public sector. And with that, I acknowledge that I think talent is a major challenge for us on the government side of the house. In particular, there's an open question of what are the new roles or skill sets that we need for both the GEOINT workforce as well as for what are the vehicles for attracting talent to actually work with us. And Gina, I know that we had discussed some elements about the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, the NCCOE. Would love to understand maybe your thoughts and if there are any suggestions that you have for the audience.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, NCCOE, is part of NIST, and it's located in Rockville, Maryland. And they initiate projects on cybersecurity related challenges, one of those being the migration to post-quantum cryptography. They started a working group project on the migration of post-quantum 2 years ago, and it's a consortium of collaborators that are all working together to help solve those problems. And it's industry, it's academia, it's banking industry is very actively involved in it because they see the threat associated with it. And that threat to the migration of post-quantum crypto is about the threat to your data. Because when there is a quantum computer strong enough to break classic crypto as we know it today, that makes your data that's been encrypted by classic crypto vulnerable for when our adversaries are harvesting the data now to decrypt it later. And so what we've been doing in this consortium, there's about 36 collaborators in there. And what we've been doing is we have several work streams. One is on the discovery of your crypto, because if you look at the National Cybersecurity Strategy and Implementation Plan and the White House executive orders that have come out over the past couple of years, it's talked about where you need to do an inventory of your crypto that you have today so that you can then prepare for the migration to the new post-quantum algorithms. And so in that working group, we have a work stream for companies that have discovery products, like IBM is a part of that, where they can use these products to go and discover where your crypto is so that you can then start figuring out, okay, my most critical systems, now I need to make sure that I have this very crypto-agile methodology for migrating to the post-quantum algorithms while still supporting the classic algorithms. Then there's another work stream on interoperability and performance testing, and that's where we've been involved with all of what normally are our competitors in the hardware security module marketplace. But we've all been working together in order to make sure these algorithms are performing. We're testing the performance of the algorithms against our products and the interoperability between our products, which normally they don't interoperate with each other. But so it's a great place, and it's a global initiative, right? This isn't just a government, U.S. government problem. It's not. It's a global challenge. So the collaborators are from all over the world. And it's kind of like a safe space where we can all work together. There's artifacts that come out of that collaboration that are available on the NIST website that can help you when you're migrating to post-quantum crypto, where we can show you what the performance statistics are, we can show you what the challenges are, and help you to get started on discovering your crypto and that migration process, which really, we say start today, but really start last year when you needed to get that inventory together.
That's amazing. I love this concept that you bring up about it not only being sort of this interinstitutional collaboration, but also studying how we can have some global impact. With that, I'd actually like to pass it back over to my government colleague, Jared. From the research perspective, you've been sort of on a mission to evaluate the rollout of these different technologies and how they could help our GEOINT tradecraft. In your perspective, I think, where are you seeing some of the most fruitful short-term applications through your work with some of the big cloud companies like IBM, Google, AWS, Azure? Any thoughts that you have for the team on this stage?
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as like actual quantum applications, we're still very early on, especially from a geospatial, because I think really where GEOINT is really going to benefit from these kind of technologies is really further down the line. Like in Joe's timeline, he was showing like more like 5 years down the road, and we're going. I mean, I think again we're really going to have to develop those quantum algorithms first to even figure out what we're going to be able to do with those computers. But I think we're going to be really leveraging those big cloud providers that you talked about, because we're not going to be able to build our own quantum computer in a relevant time, and especially, I mean, government procurement timelines. By the time we even bought a building that could even house one of these machines, I think we're already going to be, a decade too late. So I think we're really going to be leveraging like AWS, Azure, Oracle Cloud, especially with EC2 now that we're diversifying all of our cloud investments. I think we're really going to be leveraging those folks, and I think figuring out what the costing for that is going to be a fun effort. And I think really getting our folks onboarded onto those things and seeing what tools they can provide to us, I think is going to be really interesting to see too.
Jared, I have so many follow-ups, but I have a backlog now of all of your questions in my hands. So
Wow, that's awesome.
we're going to start jumping into them because I want you guys to feel like we're involving you. Someone in the audience is asking, what does training the workforce specifically look like, and what are those skills needed? And I think this opens it up to all three of you. I think if you were a student again, or if you wanted to do a career change, what's like the one skill that someone should have on their resume, the one project that would be sort of that smoking gun?
Skill or workforce?
Yep.
So there's developing the equipment, and then there's utilizing quantum. Increasingly, the industry is moving more and more to that latter stage of utilization. One doesn't need to be a physicist or a computer scientist in order to engage in quantum today. And part of our job at IBM is to make sure that we have a technology that is addressable and accessible by a broad audience of users who may not be specialized in quantum physics at all. I mean, today we have a digital environment where probably 1 out of 10 people who earn their living doing digital computing could really describe band structure of a semiconductor and electron conduction and N and P type semiconductors. They don't need to know that because the industry has matured to the point you don't even need to know how a transistor works. The same thing is true as we move the quantum industry and quantum computation to increasing levels of maturity. We won't need to know what a qubit is or how it works, just that it does, and that the programming is something that people who are skilled in Python currently can then engage in Qiskit, which is an open source kind of ubiquitous programming language. What I would like to say is there is a gap, however, to getting to that's extremely important for the workforce. One can learn Python, one can know how to program in a classical sense, but there is a leap that needs to be made in terms of building libraries of functions and pre-programmed templates that developers and programmers can pull down and apply their problems to those libraries. And that's really where a lot of the industry is headed. And in that one slide I showed with the 2 vectors headed to the right, that's exactly where algorithm development needs to go, which is forming libraries that the developer can pull down and utilize and place their problem into that format or into that template or functional, the same way as you do with high-performance computing today. So that is the leap, and I think it's incumbent upon the industry and public partner, private partnerships to help create the workforce that can move things along those dimensions, along those vectors, so that our programmers can start from a basis not at the fundamental qubit level, but at a basis where this has already been done. Now let's map that particular solution to my problem. And that's where I see it heading. And as I think a big effort that in collaboration with the industry and with government, with several agencies in the government, that there needs to be some real dedicated effort.
Right, and I mean, I would agree that from the government standpoint, we really shouldn't be investing in those people that understand quantum from the fundamental level. And I mean, even you mentioned HPC, because I think, especially in research, we do a great job of hiring these PhDs that understand the phenomenologies very, very well. They understand basic programming, and then they can kind of fuse the two together. We might bring on some contractors to help with the coding and development. But I think the big thing is really going to be understanding, all right, now I understand my phenomenology very well. How do I take that and put it into a quantum algorithm? What does that even look like? And how can I translate that? And do we try and train the phenomenologists, or do we just bring these integrators in from IBM or elsewhere that know these quantum algorithm libraries, know how to develop the code? Because I mean, even we've seen in HPC that we tried to train people to parallelize their code, but it just doesn't translate well. So now we're not using resources as well as we could. And I think especially, I mean, quantum's not going to be cheap, so I think we really need to make sure that we are doing our best to utilize the resources we have as efficiently as we can. And then obviously, like I said a little bit earlier, is training the cybersecurity workforce to really understand what this means for their workflow from a policy perspective and from a technical perspective. I think we're going to have to do a lot of investment in that and start now.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, with anybody that's doing anything with asymmetric encryption, because that's where the quantum threat is, to be able to break asymmetric encryption. If you manage a PKI infrastructure, if you're doing anything where your applications leverage PKI and asymmetric encryption, you can today make sure, check with the solutions you're using PKI with, to see are these industry companies like Thales with like their hardware security modules, we have product in place where you can start testing, right? And so you could start getting familiar with the new algorithms by testing them in your environment today to make sure that when you're ready to migrate, your applications aren't going to be as seriously affected by it.
Wow, you guys all had incredibly comprehensive answers, and this is not slowing down the flow of questions that are coming from the audience. So
better than no questions.
Yes, yes. So to make you guys feel like we are listening to you, I'm going to use one of the freshest ones first. The audience is asking, what are some strategic or operational approaches in which other countries, allies, or adversaries are doing well in this front?
Wow. Well, we know who the big adversary is that we believe is doing really well, and that's the People's Republic of China, which you always hear, like Honorable John Sherman, DoD CIO, he always says, watch out, China, 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 right? And they're probably very active, most active in the quantum computing aspect of it. But think about the adversary is harvesting your data now so they can decrypt it later. Right? And so they're figuring out how they're going to be able to get to that encrypted data as soon as they can when there's a quantum computer powerful enough to decrypt that. So they're keeping lockstep with anything and everything we're doing.
And sorry to ask you a question on that. I am curious from your perspective. Should the government be more prepared for, okay, they already have our data, they are going to be able to decrypt it? Do we prepare for what that looks like for us, or do we think that there's things we can be more proactive about besides just like keeping a better inventory?
How do you know what they've harvested, right?
Exactly.
You don't know, but by making sure that you're prepared ahead of time, right? You don't really know what they've stolen, right? But if you start using those algorithms when they become available for your most critical data, then it shouldn't be able to be broken when that is strong enough. But you want to know. You don't know what they've harvested. But it's that long-lived data, right? Intellectual property, PII information, personally identifiable, and anything you keep around a long time. I've been in application database development and data collection for many, many years, and nobody gets rid of data. They just keep collecting more and more and more, especially in the Intel and GEOINT industry. It's all about data collection. So really putting the proper protections, because I've been in this industry of cybersecurity for 14 years, and all I've talked about is encrypting and protecting your data, and yet I'm still talking about it because they're not doing enough of it, right? So they could be harvesting unencrypted data, and then you have no control over that.
So this actually bridges to one of the first questions that came from the audience. I think now the timing is right. The question was, can we provide, here on the stage, happy to also provide this example, but can you guys provide some examples of how specifically the superposition feature in quantum computing can create advantages over the traditional binary methods.
A specific application that
Yeah.
has an advantage?
Can be GIS or can be in any sector. Yep.
Yeah, so here's where I think we see some real promise and where we ought to focus in terms of geospatial applications. First would be routing and sensor tasking. So quantum computers are just perfectly built for an application where you have, say, a constellation. There are certain demands for acquiring images or other sensor data. And you have a finite amount of time to do that. You have a finite amount of resources over target. How do you allocate and adjudicate that resource to do the best job and collect the maximum information? These types of optimization problems are, in fact, the type of optimization problems that quantum computing is sort of ready built for. Have we shown advantage at this point? Not yet, but we feel very confident that as we move forward, as we have larger machines, more qubits, and we can error correct the qubits, that it will in fact be, optimization will in fact be a use case. The speed up that has been shown is right now around quadratic in level, so sometimes that's not enough. People want exponential speed up with quantum computing. That quadratic demonstration has been for very, very highly complex, large problems. So, you know, if something did take 100 hours or 100 days, now it'll take, 10 days. So, I don't know, I'd rather have a cold or a flu for 10 days than 100. So sometimes quadratic does matter. And there are certain circumstances where, in fact, that application. A second one will be feature extraction. This is where quantum has, in fact, shown some real capability and some theoretically demonstrated proof, as well as actual demonstration in certain contrived data sets. If an underlying data set has certain features that show a group theoretic behavior, that is, there's some sort of generator under that data, a feature, you can actually demonstrate and theoretically show that that group structure using quantum kernels, you can get exponential speed up. So the question is, where do you see that kind of feature in geospatial information? It's a very new area. It's exploring. We're exploring it. Others are. But I think those are two areas, and Thales has done quite a lot in one of their groups in quantum on optimizing satellite ephemera. And then there have been other groups take a look at feature extraction and enhancement of images and features. So those are two applications I see.
And I like that mention back to Thales. So Gina, over to you. Should we be concerned about a disruptive period where the capability of quantum computing to decrypt and expose all of our previously encrypted data becomes apparent?
Oh, well, you should always be concerned. I think that one of the biggest messages with the migration of post-quantum is being crypto-agile, right? So you need to be able to take the algorithms that you use today that will become known as legacy algorithms and be able to continue to support those as you're supporting the new algorithms. So there's a smooth transition between one and the other. From the perspective of the threat, I mean, you don't really know how severe it's going to be, so the preparation is really important to make sure that you're ready when that time is. And nobody really knows, right? It's all estimated. Yep. Some say 2030, some say 2035. So by preparing today with using those algorithms and protecting the data with a combination of legacy and the new algorithms, you're really protecting against that threat.
So I'm loving that also dovetails to this question from the audience, which is for those of you who are setting requirements now for satellites to launch in the 2030s to 2040s. The question is, what are the recommendations that we have to ensure that the on-ramps for quantum computing will not be short-sighted on future potential? Are there some technical requirements that we need to be including as we prepare for that?
Who wants to take that?
That's a good one.
That is a good one. I'm not touching that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, from a requirements perspective, I think we always kind of need to be, we always need to be looking more forward to what, this doesn't even just apply to quantum, right? It's to all future technologies coming down the pipe. And I think project managers have a very hard time nowadays being able to ingest, well, now I have a bajillion different options. How do I pare it down to, all right, if I'm really going to do a trade study, which 3 do I pick, right? Because we only have so many finite resources. And I mean, I think the answer is we probably don't know what requirements we're really going to, it's not really until the first program really tries and fails that I think we're going to figure it out. But I think as the government, we have to be willing to accept that risk, which is always a scary thing, that we always want to make sure that we're prepared for everything. And then if we're investing our dollars, that we're doing it as good, civilians, that trying to spend the taxpayers' dollars as best we can. But I think the only thing I can really say is just try your best from a technical standpoint, trying to look down the line. But quantum is so new and it's advancing so fast. I mean, we were kind of talking about this during the prep for the session, is that fault tolerance was one of the biggest concerns for quantum computing. How are we going to trust the results? Because technically, like even a small gravity change can throw off an entire system. But as Joe said, now we're getting much closer to that point where we can trust the results. And again, 3 months ago, that was the biggest concern, and now it's kind of on the back burner. So I think it's going to be really hard to, over the timeline of contract development, being able to figure out what we need to include. But I think the answer is we just do our best to see how it would apply.
If I might just quickly add to that, something important to keep in mind is that quantum computing is not a displacement of high-performance computing or supercomputing. View it as an adjunct or an accelerator.
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to technical hurdles, it'll be a graceful migration into the world of quantum as there is investment and a technical workforce that can bring that in. You'll start to see this have increasing mission impact. And we're also at IBM, of course, we're in the digital computing world heavily. We recognize that what we want to do is take a problem, offload the tricky parts to the quantum computer, but the vast majority of the problem is still solved on HPCs. So you look at a serverless architecture, a middleware that will orchestrate and adjudicate problems appropriately to the right resource. And I think that will also help mitigate the technical barriers that are inherently there in any disruptive technology and gracefully integrate it into what we have today.
And I think that goes to the workforce training too, is realizing what quantum's are really going to be good for, where it's worth doing that investment versus just trying to force quantum to work.
It's not like you're going to take all your computing you do today and move it to quantum computing.
Right, no.
It's the right, you're finding the right tool for the right task to do the right job, right?
Yep.
And that's true with computing today. Like when Joe and I got into computers, like, back in the olden days, not as far back as the Abacus, of course, but
For me, not.
when I was starting in application development, we had an IBM mainframe, and we developed every application on them, and they're using, like the same programming language, whether it was the right language for the job or not, because that's all we had. Today, there's so many different programming languages and databases and compute structures, right? Especially when you go to the cloud, you're sitting there picking and choosing what are you going to use. It's going to be the right compute for the job, right? And there's going to be specific use cases where, wow, this is taking me a long time to solve this problem, that let me try this in a quantum computing space to see if I can accelerate the answer to the problem. faster than I can in traditional computing today. So it's not everything's going to move there, and you're not going to have one sitting on your desk. That's for sure.
That's
you
right.
know, and so it's going to be finding out what the right applications are for the use cases to do the job.
Yes, and like I guess my response to that question too for the audience, I think if you are someone out there that's trying to figure out like collection requirements for, or sorry, like satellite requirements, one of those elements would be also error correction and fault tolerance. I think we have to realize that if we haven't really gone into the yin part of that yin-yang paradigm, more specifically looking at the compute substrate. And so as some of you are familiar, we have cold atom, we have neutral atom. And there are conversations being had about, hey, do we actually put that here on Earth and require the satellite to communicate back to Earth? Or do I want that actual compute bus on the bird itself? If you are trying to build a satellite to have that degree of error correction that would be necessary given, as my colleague Jerry had mentioned, the aggressive shifts in gravity and temperature that these satellites are exposed to. So closing that out, we have exactly 2 minutes left. So I'm going to ask that only one person answer this and pretty quickly.
Okay.
Is there any potential for quantum to change the way imagery and remote sensing is collected? Sort of like how film changed to digital. Over to anyone in the audience.
I mean, I think that one's going to be very interesting because it's not, when you look at the face of quantum, that's not necessarily something you think that it's going to excel at like versus our typical tasking systems. But I think, like Joe was saying, that there are some interesting things in feature extraction that might help with tasking and different imagery applications. I think it's just a little bit early to really be able to tell, okay, here I'm an imagery analyst, how does quantum really affect my workflow? But I think, in the next decade, we are going to see some pretty crazy applications that are really going to revolutionize how we're able to do AI ML on imagery versus just what HPC has done, and especially different types of imagery and even model simulation and stuff like that. So.
Thanks, Jared. And then final question in the last 50 seconds. Is there work being performed to build fine-tuned large language models that can help enable quantum program language code generation?
Wow.
So look, it's pretty early to look at both AI and quantum together. There are a number of applications where AI can enhance quantum computing. We know those. We're working on it currently in transpiling, in our code assist, and in noise suppression. We utilize artificial intelligence to look at what elements of a quantum circuit should in fact be suppressed. Then flip it the other way, quantum computing for AI. It's very early right now, but as I mentioned before, there are some optimization areas using quantum kernels with certain types of data sets where, in fact, it appears that quantum could enhance the ability of AI, particularly in generative AI. One of the ways I see it unfolding is that AI models will be very, very good at helping formulate the problem, and then a classical and quantum hybrid computer will tackle that problem. So that's how I see kind of in the next 5 years this industry and how quantum and AI might work together.
And to finally close out, I actually play with the 3 different cloud providers, and you can today use their respective GPTs or large language models to generate code. So the answer is yes. And with that, we are at time. But thank you guys so much for listening to us.
Thank you.
And we hope to see you soon throughout this conference.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
All right, I want to thank the panel again, Sean, Joe, Jared, Gina. A wonderful way to end our morning. Before I send everybody to break, a couple of logistical items. The poster sessions are now live in the lobby, so please make sure to talk to the authors of the maps and the posters. There are plenty of chairs up in the front for all the folks that are standing back. Most importantly, I said I keep the Disney jokes to a minimum, but there's some good things that just have to be revealed. So before we send off to break, where does Captain Hook go to get his hook replaced? The secondhand store? Come on. All right, see everybody back at 11:15. Thank you so much, 11:15.